AskReddit by Zazus. What is the worst thing you did as a child that you later realized was so bad? I tried to be like Spider-Man by hanging on our radiator and ripped it off the wall, ruining the carpet and costing around 1.5k. My brother and I had bunk beds when we were really young. We got the bright idea to get in the top bunk and grab onto the fan blades and swing around before jumping off. It took all 5 blades for us to realize it wasn't quite possible. Neighbor kid, a year older than I, would throw rocks and stuff into our yard to make the dogs bark, then complain our dogs barked. I hid in the bushes, and when rocks started coming over the back fence I tossed a brick back over. Apparently it hit him in the head and his parents found him unconscious before dinner. No one knew what happened to him and he certainly couldn't say he was abusing dogs, so it went unreported. He never knew for sure what happened, but it sure calmed him down. A brick to the head calms down just about anything. Sometimes permanently. Hugh. Okay. So my mom is a teacher. When I was little, she had this one student who wasn't particularly attractive. One night, the student called my mom, and I picked up the phone for her and asked who it was. When she told me, I, being truly the dumbest fuck of all the fucks, not realizing she could hear me, yelled across the house, "Mom, your ugly student is calling." I don't want to talk about it. My dad's a psychologist. He had a patient who was in the middle of some sort of crisis who called the house and I answered. I carried the phone over to him while saying "Pala GGGIINNNGGG doctor, last night." After the call my dad was like, "That man was suicidal. He doesn't need to hear a kid making it sound like a joke." When I was a toddler I pulled out one of my cat's whiskers and was overall quite rough with them. I study animal care now, and whenever we cover cats, I end up remembering it and I just feel terrible for the cats and wish I'd never done anything to hurt or distress them. To be perfectly honest, that is complete and total lack of adult supervision. Toddlers do not have the capacity to think about others in that way. We as parents have to teach them to understand they are hurting animals. People. My toddler beats the shit out of me and I have to be patient and understanding to teach him not to do that. I often have to separate him from the dog because he is rough and teach him not to treat the animal roughly. It is a long and hard process, but it is ultimately your parents who should have been watching you to stop it from getting to that point. You obviously grew up to have a lot of empathy and I hope you learn to not blame yourself and understand that kids in general are assholes. Sorry this is long, but I'm actually very upset about the lack of supervision you received for that to happen. I never leave my child alone with any animals. In elementary I would go to my best friend's house after school until my mom got off work. Her mom would feed us after school. Sometimes if we didn't like the food, we would pour it in a hole in the dry wall in the basement, literally soup, sandwiches, misc food we didn't want. OMG, we hid meatloaf in my grandmother's ceiling tiles whenever she cooked it for us. One day I noticed that if I stuck a magnet on my parents' new TV, it made the colors look all funky. What I didn't know at the time is that the funky colors were permanent. I basically bricked a brand new TV. I wish I knew back then that you could get an old computer monitor and place it next to a tube TV and hit degauss, and it would cause a degauss wave and take care of that. I saw someone on a TV show do that thing where you pull the chair out from someone right before they sit and everyone laughed. Did that to my friend at a birthday party a week later and she cried and nobody laughed. Thought I just fucked up the joke until I suddenly remembered it 10 years later. I did that too and I still feel bad about it too. Did it in music class, probably in like the 6th grade. I'm sorry Kobe. Stealing. When I used to be super young, everything went in pockets. Glasses, on my face. Food. I was eating it before we left. Parents had to check my pockets before walking out of the store. That's honestly hilarious and very much harmless. My son did the same thing a couple times when he was little and my daughter did it once too. The shop owners always understood cause kids. Honestly, I was a bully when I was really little and didn't change till I got bullied when I was like 10. I didn't necessarily get bullied myself, but I picked on this gay kid a lot in 3rd and 4th grade for exactly that reason. I never really got physical with him, but I made fun of him a lot and it led to me being suspended. A few years later I apologized to him and we made up. Still regret it. I'm sorry, Milo. I played with a baby who was probably less than 4 months old by grabbing his arms, lifting him to a standing position, then letting go to watch him fall backwards. He cried so many times. It was done in his crib, but it still bothers me that he was repeatedly falling on his back and head so suddenly, and I'm sure I probably gave him a headache. I keep wondering if he's okay now. I want to cry just thinking about it. I was 5 and it was my neighbor's son. She would leave the room to do something else or talk with adults and told me to play with him. That's what I did. I blame the adults for not supervising, not you as a 5-year-old. My older sister, who I love because she was around since I was born, she was 7 years older than me, and by the time she was 13 she was raging alcoholic. I tried covering for her. She would rave my mother's liquor cabinet and I would carefully refill the bottles with water to make sure that they were on the same level so as she didn't get in trouble. I enabled her behavior for a good long time because I was trying to be helpful and loyal. How's she doing now? Pushing my grandma in a pool when I was like 6-7, due to the fact that I didn't have siblings to grow up with, so I used my grandparents as that sort of figure. Looking back at it is kinda funny. Grandma wasn't too mad with me. Now it's something we laugh about, but she really could have drowned BC. It was the deep end too. I'm sorry, but this hilarious. I'm glad you and grandma can laugh about it. In the mid-70s, we moved into an apartment complex after my folks divorced. It didn't take long to discover that the dumpsters were full of all kinds of neat things. One glorious summer evening I scrounged up a little fake hand. Actually, more like part of a hand with one finger extended upward. It was motorized. Already had batteries, too. I walked around the complex with my spooky finger thingy, showing it to anybody who showed interest, which was just about every adult I encountered. Great icebreaker, that. I brought it home later that evening. My mom was horrified. I explained that it wasn't a real hand. Didn't matter. We negotiated. I could have the electronics, but the finger had to go. Weird compromise, but whatever. My older brother performed the surgery. The innards were delivered as promised, then the magic finger disappeared forever. Swallowed plenty of change, on purpose. I believe I have 37 cents in my gut. Bro's a walking piggy bank. There was a very thin, shy girl in my first grade class that was my partner on a field trip. We sat together on the bus, and despite my questions and attempts at conversation, I was getting frustrated with her not really saying much. We were told to hold hands when we got off the bus, and I remember squeezing her little hand so hard that she pulled back and winced. I don't know why I did that, but I think about it now, 40 some years later. She changed schools later in the year and I never saw her again, but I will never forget how bad I felt for doing that. Told myself that I needed to have the emotional maturity of an adult. Sounds familiar. Realized when I was 13 or so that I had to be mature and act as an adult because nobody else was capable of doing so. Ran through some neighbors' wheat fields without their permission. Theresa May. Tried to listen as my dad emotional dumped on me about topics that were way beyond a tween's comprehension. I probably shouldn't tell you, but you are mature enough. I didn't want him to think otherwise, but I was writhing with anxiety internally. I don't think that was your fault. He should have someone to talk to it about. Neither was it his, of course. Bad things happen and we want to talk about them. I was a full-blown kleptomaniac as a kid, up until about age 9 or so. Never stole anything too big or too valuable to anyone, but I did steal lots of little things for no real reason. It was just this inexplicable, irresistible compulsion I had at the time. Was 8 and invited to a friend's house for dinner. The mother asked if I liked the food, and I said no. She told me I had to learn some manners. I was never asked over again. So much for honesty. When I was 4-5, my parents would watch movies with very inappropriate sex scenes when I was in the room. They knew I was in the room, they just didn't care enough to take me out. I'd try to recreate the scenes with my family friend and cousin, both girls around my age. We'd hide in some corner of the house and get naked. The worst we ever did was get naked and lay on top of each other. Luckily didn't know what sex was. My aunt caught me and my cousin once and told me to stop it, so I never did it again with her. I think it was the first time I ever felt shame because I felt like I was corrupting my cousin as she was just listening to me. Never got caught with my family friend, but we just ended up stopping soon after, probably because getting naked got boring. I don't know if my cousin remembers, but pretty sure my family friend does because it got pretty awkward between us for a couple years. I lied down under my Christmas tree and wiggled to get under the branches. It was so pretty, so I said I wished I was homeless so I could sleep under a tree every night. My dad told me that I should never wish for something like that and explained how hard homeless people's lives are. He didn't try to make me feel bad, but I felt horrible and cried. I was friends with a little girl next door named Tootie. We were probably about 5. I had someone visiting one day and we were jumping on an old mattress by the trash. When my visiting friend heard her name, we started singing Tutti Frutti, Oh Rooty. I didn't mean anything by it because it was a song with her name on it, but I hurt her bad enough that she wouldn't be my friend anymore. I've regretted that for almost 50 years. The neighborhood kids discovered an access panel that led to the crawl spaces under a massive apartment building. One kid has mastered the experience. He could jump up through the panel, had dug a tunnel into another area underneath. It led to a room about 8 feet in all dimensions, filled up halfway diagonally with dirt. He made the trip a few times a week, and each trip he lit a candle, put it at the top of the hill in this room, then he would leave through another panel. I crawled through the tunnel once, and only once. Looking back, lucky there wasn't an earthquake, some kid would have gotten buried alive. The pile of dripping wax was 5-6 feet long when I saw it. That little jerk was lighting a fire several times a week underneath someone's house and fucking leaving it there. Me. Oh, cool. Well, I just won't talk about this to anyone. Thankfully, the issue was discovered, and I noticed all the access panels were repaired several months later. I licked my plate completely clean like a dog and stuck it back in the cabinet.